So the shift, at this point, we know it's a problem. You guys gave it in the poll. A lot of you know that there's some inconsistency or you foresee that happening. So we need to go from reactive, which are those paper logs, and then the auditing after the fact. Again, paper doesn't prevent anything. It's just keeping that record. So we need to move into that proactive compliance where we're actually able to verify before someone arrives and enforce that in real time, maintaining that constant visibility. The goal isn't more work for you, right? Obviously, we hope that technology is a better tool for us to make our job easier. And we want to make sure that the compliance is coming in earlier before these people are actually hitting the floor.
That is truly interesting, right? Like, let's kind of like walk through like in that lenses of proactiveness, and maybe like I'll kind of like try to pitch it in 3 different ways and 3 different pillars that we would use to eliminate contractor risk, right? And the first pillar on the far left, pre-qualification and training. Like, everything should be verified before the contractor arrives. The documents, certifications, the insurance, if they're not compliant, they don't get scheduled, right? That's how you eliminate the risk upstream. When you go to second, and in real-time enforcement, as Megan was mentioning, good you have the paperwork, good you have everything, but like how do you actually enforce that when every single day contractors, new contractors, returning visitors, returning contractors are coming on site? How do you check that? Paper log's great. I anticipate that's definitely not ideal because you can't even check all these documents every day in the file cabinets of the world, right? So it's not enough to check just once when you're doing it pre-arrival. Like, you want to do it at compliance when they get access to your door, right? And then obviously real-time enforcement like that, you can see the painting the picture in here in terms of like how digitization paints like a huge and important layer of that.